Chapter 1. Blood Moon Dreams. The moon bled over the screaming fens. Not the weak, pale orb worshipped by men, but Morsleib, the glowing wound in the sky. Its jaundiced green light pulsed through the dense mist, casting the rotting reeds and stagnant pools of the marsh in hues of sickly emerald. Shadows writhed with a life of their own, and the very air choked with sulfur and decay. In a blackened grove where the trees twisted like suffering beasts, Skargor Mawsight knelt before a crude altar made from the jawbone of a river giant. His matted fur glistened with swamp water, caked filth and dried blood. Bones dangled from his horns, trophies of past feasts and sacrifices, clinking softly in the windless air. His fingers, more claw than hand, smeared entrails across the stone in spirals. A still-living swamp eel, throat slit but not dead, squirmed as its blood fed the ritual. He spoke in snarls, bleats, and guttural tones only the children of chaos could understand. "Rund, Krashnok, Morsleib, see. Me." His eyes rolled back into his skull. Flames. He saw flames. A town, no, a human town, burning, pale towers cracked like eggs under the crush of hoof and horn. Children screamed beneath shattered statues. The air was thick with ash and meat smoke. At the center of it all, standing atop a blood-slick altar made from broken cartwheels and pulped corpses, was Skargor himself. His horns had grown, curling like serpents. His eyes glowed. His hoofs were planted on the spines of knights. Morsleib loomed above, pulsing, laughing, whispering promises. Feast, flame, and fall, the time is ripe. The dream twisted. He saw Gravemark, not in ruin, but alive. Its walls proud, its gates open, its people unaware. A celebration. Foolish humans danced around bonfires, their crude music like flies buzzing in ears. They clapped, drank, shouted praises to Sigmar like blind, fat pigs before slaughter. But they would fall. Oh yes. He saw their bones forming the foundations of a new herdstone, their blood turning to fog over the ruined town square. He saw himself again, but this time not in triumph, in chains. His flesh burned. His own herd turned on him. An ogre's fat fist smashed his teeth in. Steel bars, mocking laughter, a lash cracking his back again and again and again. No. He tore free from the vision, gasping, howling, spitting bile. The swamp echoed his rage. Birds exploded from the trees. Slime bubbled in alarm. His eyes narrowed. Visions meant choice. The dark gods whispered both glory and doom, but the path, the method was clear. Infiltration, deceit, filth that walks among filth. The humans would open their gates willingly. The ogres would carry the key. A plan formed, like mold growing in a dead man's mouth. He rose from the altar dripping gore. Around him, beastmen stirred, dozens, snouted gorkin, muscle-bound bestigers, lesser ungors with twitching ears and squinting paranoia. They sniffed the air, instinctively aware that their shaman had seen the path. One approached, a bestigor named Foulhide, the largest of them. "You bark at ghosts again, Mawsight," he growled, voice like gravel and mucus. "Or did the moon finally chew your brain?" Skargor turned his head slowly. One eye still rolled back in its socket, the other glared like a glowing ember. Then he lunged. Claws raked across Krull's snout, horns collided, teeth tore. The pack didn't stop them. They watched, frothing, grunting in excitement. Blood sprayed the reeds. Krull screamed once before Skargor's jaws locked onto his throat and ripped. Silence. The body twitched. Skargor spat the hunk of windpipe to the ground and raised his blood-soaked claws. "The moon has spoken," he howled. "A town of manlings waits for the flame. Gravemark, walls tall, but minds weak. a festival of sheep. When they dance, we slay. The herd erupted in bleats and roars. We go inside, disguised, shackled but free. We rot them from within. He smeared Kroll's blood across his chest like war paint. Ogres carry us like prizes, and then we burst from chains like the moon from clouds. The pack understood. Violence and trickery, their twin tongues. They bayed at Mercenaries. They beat their chests. They pissed on Kroll's corpse. Plans would be made. Ogres bribed. Flesh disguised. But for now, the fen screamed with the songs of chaos. Skargor smiled, a jagged tear across a warped face. Gravemark would fall. And when it did, it would burn in the name of the Blood Moon. Chapter 2. Council in the Shadows. The wind moaned like a dying calf as it slithered through the shattered bones of the Gore-Tooth ravine, where blood had been spilled long before the stars remembered names. This was where beast lords came to parley, not with words, but with snarls, threats, and the sharp reminders of claw and blade. No fire burned here, no warmth, only the stench of dried blood, cloven hooves, and centuries of hatred soaked into the stones. Skargor Mawsight stood beneath the skull of a dragon, blackened by lightning and warped by chaos. Its hollow sockets leaked pus-yellow moss, and its teeth were carved with runes older than Sigmar's bloodline. He smeared ash across his chest in spirals of power. In his hand was a staff capped with a melted lantern, glowing faintly green from the moon's malignant gaze. Around him the others gathered. There were 6 beast lords, each a terror in their own right. Grakhar's spine splitter, thick as an ox, his horns broken from past duels, his hide stitched with the skins of human children. His voice came in snorts and bellows. He believed only in brute strength, and everything else was cowardice. Drufka Blitgor, lithe, twitchy, paranoid, a pale-coated Gore who claimed to hear the laughter of gods in every rustle of leaves. He gnawed his own fingers raw between thoughts. Vorgak the hook-tongue, part Gore, part something else. His jaw split sideways like a toad's, and he had a third eye sewn shut with bone thread. He saw things in the dark that others didn't. Crash, one ear, brutish, limping, his tusks twisted into hooks. He said little, but his cleaver, rusted and alive with buzzing flies, said plenty. Mulgrew the Black Womb, a she-bray with bloated, pregnant-looking pustules along her arms. She claimed her unborn kin whispered battle songs from within her. And last, the youngest, Fesgor Hornchild, who still burned with the arrogance of unproven blood. He wanted war. Now. They surrounded Skargor in a loose half-circle, snorting, twitching, biting at their own hides. The lesser Gores and Ungores flanked the ridges above, weapons in hand, jaws slathered in froth. One wrong look, and the council would end in slaughter. That was tradition. "The time is ripe," Skargor began, voice like gravel dragged through bile. "Morsleb has cracked the sky. Greymark calls to us. Its walls are stone, but its heart is meat." Grakhar snorted. "Then we charge. No need for slime sneak games. Let horn and hoof bring it down. I have 40 heads waiting to split open. Yes, raise them. Gra. Let their bones burn in the roots of the herdstone." Fesgor howled, pounding his hooves. "Fools," Druvka hissed, his eyes darting to shadows. "The manlings have fire sticks, cannons, wall towers, and sigils. Magic that burns without flame. You forget the lightning that fell at Black Hollow. You forget the screaming. I still hear it. It crawls in my sleep." Crash grunted, too strong to strike alone, but still. He gestured to Skargor. "What do you see, witch?" All eyes turned to the shaman. Skargor stepped forward, jabbing his staff into the rotting earth. "I saw their feast, their celebration, blind pigs circling fires. It is not their strength that protects them, but their stupidity. And we shall become their stupidity. Speak plain, bastard, growled Grokhar. Skargor smiled, a jagged, unnatural tear of a grin. We become their prisoners. We wear chains. The ogres take us in, as gifts, as beasts for mockery. Then, we burst forth, from within, like flies from a corpse. Silence. A long, heavy breath of disbelief. Fetsker looked disgusted. You'd have us walk among manlings like tame dogs. Not tame, festering. We rot them from inside. When the bell tolls for their gods, we tear their throats from behind their laughter. Skargor's eyes glowed. It is sacrilege. It is blasphemy. It is perfect. Druvka licked his lips. It sings in the walls. The dream wind likes this. Vorgak nodded slowly, blood trailing from his stitched eye. Yes. I see the shapes. Bent, hidden, like worms in bread. Grokhar, trembling with rage, slammed his axe into a stone, splitting it in half. Cowards, all of you, I piss on your tricks. Then piss, but do not bleed on us when your charge ends at the mouth of a cannon, spat Mulgrud, bile dribbling down her chin. Skargor lifted his staff high. Enough! We choose now. We rot them from within, or we charge and die like the beast sons of fools. Who stands with the Bloodmoon's will? One by one, they raised weapons, some in rage, some in fear, some in wicked delight. Only Grokhar refused. Skargor stepped toward him, slow, deliberate. No, he hissed. Then you are the first sacrifice. Grokhar roared, swinging his axe, but Skargor was faster. He drove his staff into Grokhar's chest, not the metal tip but the lantern. It burst on contact, showering him in burning green filth that sizzled and boiled the flesh beneath his armor. The smell of melting meat filled the ravine. Grokhar screamed until his lungs collapsed inward. Silence again. Then cheers, howls, claps, the savage applause of monsters. Skargor turned, triumphant. Find the ogres, bribe them, chain the strongest among us. Gravemark shall not fall to thunder and hoof, it shall fall to rot and deceit. Above them Morschlieb leered, full and vile. The plan had begun. Chapter 3. Mercenary Pact. The ground shuddered. Trees snapped like old bones underfoot. Birds fled, their screeches trailing into the fetid air like panic itself had wings. Ogres. Not just any, but man-eaters. Mercenary monsters who dined on human nobles one day and served them stew the next. Their loyalty was bought by coin, meat, and the chance to smash something until it stopped screaming. And Skargor Mawsight needed them. The Beastmen had tracked them to a ruined outpost on the edge of the screaming fens. It had once been a toll station, perhaps, a squat stone building surrounded by rusted spikes and half-rotted merchant flags. Now, bones were strung up as wind chimes, and crude ogre glyphs, mostly depictions of food and violence, were smeared across the walls in blood and paint. Inside, 6 ogres loitered around a fire pit that spat greasy black smoke. Cooked limbs rotated on a spit. A keg of something that smelled like ale and horse piss sat half-empty beside a squatting brute with meat between his toes. At the center was Borgrand Mukma. Wide as a haycart and twice as filthy, Borgrand wore armor made from mismatched shields and tavern signs, all bent to barely fit his bloated gut. A feathered hat sat on his head, tilted, like he thought himself clever. His lower jaw jutted out unnaturally, swollen and bone-grafted, stained from a lifetime of chewing metal, wood, and bone. Flies clung to him in worship. As Skargor stepped into the camp, silence fell. Even beasts and brutes had instinct, and something ancient in Borgrand's skull whispered, "This one drips with the dark. Be wary." Skargor raised a bleeding goat skull in one hand. "We come with gold and pray, but it must be dressed in chains." The ogres grunted, glancing at each other. Borgrond scratched at his underbelly, dislodging something wet. "Talkin' all fancy, eh?" he belched. "You lot stink of warp and wrongness. I should charge extra for dealing with your kind." Skargor bared his fangs. "We do not stink, we fester. Festering spreads. You will profit from the rot." Borgrond seemed amused. He stood, towering even over the largest gore. "You got coin, Hornface?" Skargor snapped his claws. Two Ungors dragged forward a battered iron chest. They opened it with a groan. Inside, teeth. Not beastmen fangs, but human teeth, hundreds, each filed down, coated in dried gore, enchanted with foul glyphs. Borg peered inside, one eye squinting. He sniffed. Bit one of the teeth. Chomped. Crunchy. "Each one cursed to whisper your name into Morslab's ear," Skargor rasped. "You will never be forgotten, and there is meat, gold, loot." Borgrond stroked his gut. "You want us to take you in, shackled, like. You're prisoners?" Skargor nodded. "Chains, muzzles, mud to dull our scent, ash to hide the marks of the dark. You tell the humans we are beasts caught in the wild. Offer them for their festival games. They will cheer your strength and open their gates." The ogre scratched his jaw with a meat cleaver. "And when do you burst out and start killing them all?" "When the second bell tolls, when the sky is drunk with firelight." Borgrond looked around at his boys. They chuckled. One farted loudly, another drooled and began gnawing on his own hand. He nodded. "Sounds messy. It will be divine." Borgrond extended a slab-like hand. "We got a deal, beast thing, but if you lot bite me or turn too soon, I'll sit on your head until your brain runs out your ears." Skargor didn't take the hand. Instead, he leaned in close, breathing rot and death across the ogre's tusks. "If we turn too soon, the town lives. And if the town lives, you get nothing, except a crossbow in your eye." Borgrond laughed, a booming, bowel-loosening sound. "You're ugly and smart. I like that." Behind Skargor, the other beastmen writhed in discomfort. They hated this. Submitting, even in ruse, was like swallowing vomit. But the shaman had spoken, and the dark gods watched. The deal was struck. Chains would be forged, ash smeared, hooves blunted, symbols scoured. Soon they would walk into Gravemark not as monsters, but as spoils of war. And then, when the bells tolled and the laughter rang, the gates would scream open with blood. Chapter 4. Flesh Masquerade. It began with the razors. Blades not meant for grooming but for butchery, rusted things pulled from ogre sacks, chipped with dried fat, jagged at the edge. Shaving a beastman was an abomination, a stripping of their chaos-blessed filth, a violation of everything sacred. It tore not just hair but identity. The hide of the gore was not mere skin, it was proof of allegiance to the dark gods. And it was sliced away. One by one, the chosen stepped forward, those strongest of the herds, trusted to contain their rage long enough to deceive the manlings. They entered the clearing amid the groaning boughs of the blackwood pines, snarling, twitching, resisting the urge to rip out throats. Their fur clung in matted mats of filth and parasite, symbols of their pride, now peeled away like rotting bark. The first was Ugultar Spinebelt, a bestigor of savage legend, with a mane so thick it had strangled 2 men on its own in a raid. He spat as the razors neared. "You flay me like a sow," he snarled at Skargor. "I'll kill you with my tailbone when this is over." "Then survive long enough to grow another," the shaman hissed, eyes glowing. "The town needs sheep, not thunder. You will be shackled, gagged, neutered in spirit until the bell tolls." The blades scraped. Fur fell in wet clumps. Gudar screamed, not in pain, but humiliation. The rest of the herd watched, some chittering nervously, others howling in cruel joy. Horns were dulled with stones, claws filed down to stumps, tails bound in iron coils. Beastmen, predators, killers, avatars of chaos, reduced to something barely more than meat on legs. The muzzles came next. Crude iron masks with jagged teeth, designed not to silence but to shame. Their tongues swelled against the metal. Every breath came through slits laced with dried feces and decay. Ogres laughed as they clamped them shut. "What's the matter, horn boys?" One ogre jeered, slapping a gur across the back. "Don't like being on the other side of the leash?" The Gor tried to lunge, biting through the pain. He was clubbed in the face until a tooth bounced off the moss. Chains followed. Not symbolic, not ceremonial. Heavy links soaked in animal piss and swamp water. Every rattle was a humiliation. Ankles and wrists bound together. Some were half hogtied, forced to shuffle, hunched and drooling like beasts truly broken. But they were not broken, only caged, and beneath the surface, wrath boiled. As the ogres jeered and prepared wagons, Skargor and his Bray-Shamans moved among the disguised with pots of ash paste. They daubed it carefully, every horn, hoof, and shoulder. They painted over brands of chaos with runes twisted into symbols of disease or misfortune. Not magic, just dirt that lies well. Human priests would sense nothing but filth. And filth was common in the border princes. For the final stroke, Skargor knelt and whispered to each, dripping his blood into their ears. "The gods still see you, the rot is only skin deep. Soon you shall split this world open from the inside." Then he moved on. The disguised ones moaned, low, deep, guttural, not from pain, but rage so compressed it sizzled behind their eyes. One young gur, no more than 2 winters blooded, broke in the middle of the process. He sobbed, gnawed through his muzzle, and bit into the throat of the nearest ogre before 4 others piled on him and snapped his spine like driftwood. His corpse was fed to the warhounds. No others dared falter. As dusk bled across the sky, the wagons were loaded. Ogres chained the prisoners in view of the road, leering at them for show. Their bellies full of ale, their arms wet with muck, they set off west toward Gravemark. Behind them, the remaining beastmen watched in silence. On the ridge above, the last view of their kin showed hornless monsters in iron, dragged like cattle. But their eyes were aflame. And when Gravemark opened its gates to celebrate their false victory, it would be welcoming a slaughter. Chapter 5. March of the Beast Prisoners. The chains groaned like dying trees. Day 1 of the march westward began under a sky smeared with yellow-gray clouds, like the heavens themselves had eaten filth and couldn't hold it down. The caravan slithered out from the tree line like a tapeworm of rusted wagons, dragging behind it the greatest heresy beastmen had ever committed: obedience. Each wagon carried captured monsters, shaved, chained, and snarling through cracked muzzles. The ogres led the procession, bellowing, farting, laughing, slapping one another across their titanic shoulders as they shoved their prize through the muddy road. The sound of groaning wheels and jangling iron mixed with caws and distant crow song. The world smelled of wet hay, rotted boot leather, and bubbling wrath. Skargor Mawsight rode not in the front nor in the rear, but within the herd of false captives, hidden in plain sight among his kind. His skull was painted with soot, and he wore a stitched-together blindfold of flayed priest skin, a parody of humility. Every hoof-step was a humiliation, Every moment not rending flesh was agony. The dark gods whispered. They hissed from shadows and smoke, from puddles of stagnant water, from the twitching nerves beneath flayed fur. Kill now. Tear the ogres. Feast on the weakling towns. Blood. The smell is thick. Just a little. A taste. They won't know. The lie is a chain, not armor. Break free. They passed a fishing hamlet that stank of brine and fish blood. Children played by a pier, throwing pebbles into water while their mothers hung gutted eels like drying intestines from wooden frames. One boy pointed at the wagons, grinning. "Look, Mama." "Beasties." A gore's eye twitched behind the bars. The boy's voice reminded him of a child once eaten raw, screaming with bubbles of blood in his throat. The gore's claws flexed, his jaws strained, the muzzle held just barely. A second later, a tooth cracked in his mouth from the pressure. He swallowed it and tasted blood. The ogres laughed and spat at the villagers. "Caught 'em near the Black Fens. Right stinky lot, bringing 'em for Sigmar's Day in Gravemark. They'll be squealing in the pit by sunset." The villagers cheered. Some even offered the ogres wine and cheese. One old man walked up and tried to pet an Unger through the bars. The Ungor pissed on him. Skargor trembled with restrained rage. This is what they thought of him. Pets. Animals. Laughingstock. Later that night, the caravan camped near a dried-up creek, ringed with fly-bitten trees and mushrooms that glowed faintly purple. Ogres drank and roasted a cow they'd stolen 2 towns back. The Beastmen huddled in the wagons like caged nightmares. And they fought. Not openly, no. Whispers. Jabs. Claw scratches. Eyes burning. Teeth gnashed silently in the dark. One Ungor, maddened by hunger, snapped and tried to chew through the chain binding his neck. Another Gore kicked him square in the jaw, shattering it, then whispered, "You break early. I'll use your ribs as quills." Later, Ugatha Spinebelt, still raw from his forced shaving, tore out a patch of his own skin just to feel something sacred again. And Skargor, he bled, quietly. He carved spirals into his thigh with a sliver of bone, muttering sigils to keep his gods at bay. For now. Day 2, they passed a merchant caravan heading the opposite way, fat donkeys, perfumed humans, and trinkets wrapped in silks. The Beastmen could smell the perfume, the sweet blood. The softness. A bray slipped out, too loud. One merchant flinched. That didn't sound right." Beaugrand acted quickly. He backhanded the wagon, causing it to shake violently. "Shut it, you! I'll roast your balls for stew if you snarl at another fancy man." The merchant laughed nervously and moved on. Inside the wagon, Skargor laughed, low and bubbling like rot. "This chain is a lie," he whispered to the others, barely moving his lips. "It binds us not. It tempers us. When it breaks, the gods will scream with joy." The others nodded, just barely. Their eyes burned with the fury of caged stars. By the 4th day, the town of Gravemark crested the hills beyond a field of dead orchards. Its white towers rose in arrogant silence, banners flapping. They could hear bells, laughter. Inside the wagons, the beastmen crouched lower, snarling beneath their breath. Soon they would show them what it meant to chain the wild. Soon they would rip open the town's belly from the inside and let the rot bloom. Chapter 6. Gates of Gravemark. Gravemark, a tumor of stone and order. A festering boil of civilization clawed into the edge of the wild. Its walls, tall and proud, were stitched from limestone and arrogance. Sigmarite banners drooped from towers like sanctified entrails. Sentries in polished armor manned the parapets, muskets slung lazily, eyes dulled by routine. To the beastmen, it was disgust incarnate. So clean! Ugathar's spine belt hissed through gritted teeth, his muzzle clinking with each word. I can smell their pride. It stinks like old milk. Skargor Mawsight, cloaked in his mockery of submission, blindfold and ash-smeared skin, did not reply. His thoughts boiled beneath the soot. Every brick of Gravemark was a blasphemy against the natural, every cheer a knife against chaos. They waited in wagons crusted with dried piss and rust as the gates loomed. And then they opened. A roar of joy surged out from within. Trumpets blared. Children screamed in delight. Men and women cheered the arrival of the ogre mercenaries, adorned with feathers, bones, and stolen sashes from the road. They walked with grins split across their bloated faces, dragging chains and shackled horrors behind them like festival floats. Beastmen, dressed in shame, chained like spectacle. The herd stepped into the light of the town. Mockery greeted them. Flowers were thrown not for the prisoners, but the ogres. People laughed and pointed. A fat merchant shoved a meat pie in a gore's face. "Oi, you want a bite, monster?" he chuckled, spittle flecking his jowls. The gore growled beneath his muzzle. A woman crossed herself, muttering blessings. "Sigmar, protect us. Look at their eyes, like fire." The guard nearby patted her shoulder. "Nothing to worry over. They're chained tighter than a witch in heat." Through the press of bodies, the Beastmen saw Gravemark's insides. Market stalls packed with spices, cloth, and glinting steel, children with wooden swords pretending to slay the beast things, dogs barking, sensing truth behind the facade. And overhead bells rang. Sigmar's triumph had begun. All the while the ogres kept the charade alive. Borgrond Muckmore swaggered beside the chained ones, chewing a turkey leg and spitting bone. "Caught these beauties near the fens, took down 2 ogres before we got 'em trussed up. You'll see 'em in the pit fights. Might be the last thing you do if they break loose, eh?" The crowd laughed. Skargor snarled inwardly. Let them laugh. Soon their mouths would fill with ash and screaming. They were led not to cages, not to dungeons, but to the Temple of Sigmar Reborn, an ancient structure repurposed after the last goblin incursion, a mockery of faith layered over rubble and rot. The perfect holding pen. It was cold stone and flickering candlelight. Old murals of hammer-wielding saints gazed down with chipped faces and judging eyes. A single gate of iron barred the nave. Guards were posted lazily outside, more interested in gossip and dice. Inside, the beastmen were unchained, but only partly. They crouched in corners, muzzled, eyes burning through the dark. Beneath their feet, old bloodstains had been scrubbed but never truly removed. One Unger sniffed at the cracks. "This place remembers pain." Ugtar grunted. "It once more." Skargor sat in the center of the nave, cross-legged, carving spirals into the dust with his claw. "This is sacred ground now. Defiled by their idols, it will become our altar. They lock us here, thinking we are broken. But we are seeds, and blood is water." The others chuckled, soft, dark things. One Gore gnawed his muzzle until the gums bled, painting the floor with a crescent. Outside, the guards laughed. One yawned. "Heard the ale is 2 for 1 at the Black Dog tonight." Another muttered, "Should have been posted at the arena. These freaks ain't gonna do much." They didn't know. They couldn't know that behind the rusted bars and hollow murals, a storm had been caged. A hurricane of horn and fury, waiting for the sky to burn. Skargor licked his lips. Chapter 7. Among the Herd of Man. The temple stank of candle smoke, sweat, and rot beneath stone. It was not the rot of sacred death, but of stagnation, a place built to suppress chaos, not understand it. Its walls bore chipped murals of hammer-wielding saints casting down horned foes, their once vibrant paint dulled to piss yellow and flaking from damp. The altar at the far end was little more than a slab of gilt. Skargor Mawsight knelt in a corner of the nave like a broken dog, his muzzle rusting with dried blood, his eyes closed behind the blindfold of priest skin. He was the image of a captured beast, a prisoner of brute force. It was a perfect lie. Behind the ruined blindfold, his eye was wide open, always watching, and so were the others. The Beastmen, those selected for the deception, had learned the town's rhythms with the precision of a predator studying a herd. They watched not through direct stares, but from beneath lowered brows, through slitted pupils that missed nothing. The gatekeeper. His name was Tomas, a once proud soldier now reduced to a wineskin and a limp. He manned the eastern gate alone during festival nights, slouched on a stool, eyes sunken, armor mismatched. Skargor had heard him grumble through the bars on the second night. 4 silver to watch pigs in chains. Could be drinking, could be with Anja. He'd seen Tomas piss himself trying to unbar the gate when the bell had rung late the previous night. He stumbled, he vomited. He returned with stains on his tabard. Weak, unworthy. Skargor etched his name in dirt and blood, a promise made to be broken. The tunnel. On the 3rd day, one of the Gors, Marthak Snoutcleave, digging feverishly at a loose stone beneath the rear wall of the temple, struck foul luck. Behind crumbled plaster and cracked tile, he found a forgotten sewer line, long collapsed and reeking of old wet stone and rat nests. Not wide enough for an ogre, barely fit for a man, perfect for a Gor. They dug by claw and fang when the guards were loudest, during sermons, trumpet blasts, and the fire-eater's performance in the square. The waste inside the tunnel reeked of centuries-old blasphemy. Bones crunched beneath them, flies gathered. Skargor called it the second maw. It would open. The traitor. He came to the temple under pretense of inspection. A priest of Sigmar, but one who reeked of clove smoke and fear. His eyes twitched. His robes were fine, but beneath the folds he carried bruises. And secrets. He walked the nave alone and knelt before the altar, not in prayer, but in calculation. He muttered to himself, flinching at shadows. His name was Father Gellert. He returned each night, always late, always drunk on sacramental wine. One night, he approached Skargor. He believed him asleep. But Skargor never truly slept. "I know what you are," Gellert whispered, his voice sharp, brittle. "Your eyes burn like all the rest, like the ones in my dreams. You'll kill them, all of them." A pause. "Do it quickly. Let me go with you. Let me be spared. I've read the old books. I know the shapes." He leaned closer, and Skargor could smell the sickness inside him. "Take me with you when it happens. I'll unlock the doors. I'll let your friends in." Skargor did not speak. He merely tilted his head slightly, enough for Gellert to take as a sign. And then he whispered back, barely audible, "You will be the first." Gellert smiled. He was too mad to understand it was a death sentence. Every crack was a door. Every weakness a wound. The Beastmen memorized the rotation of guards, the patrol routes, how many steps the captain took before scratching his chin. They marked where the cobblestones cracked, where the walls were soft with mold. They'd learned the sounds of the bell tower, how many beats to call for prayer, how many for celebration, how many for alarm. And all the while they festered, snarling in silence, waiting. Skargor kept his kin focused with pain and vision. Each night he whispered prayers into the bones sewn into his mane. Each night he peeled a new layer from his own skin. Each night he bled into the floor, feeding the stone beneath the temple. Soon it would remember its true purpose, not as a place of faith, but a cradle of slaughter. Soon Gravemark's towers would fall, not from siege, but from within. Chapter 8. Festival Fires. The scent of roasting pork and wet ale clogged the air like a corpse bloated in a summer ditch. Gravemark pulsed with ignorant life. Colorful streamers flapped from windows, fluttering like the intestines of hung traitors. Market stalls burst with pastries, cheap wine, and blessed bread stamped with Sigmar's hammer, holy wrought, meant to celebrate man's triumph over monsters. And yet in the center of it all, monsters already stood. Skargor Mawsight crouched within the temple nave, muzzle hanging crooked after a deliberate break the night before. Blood crusted down his neck. He could taste iron and rust and the festering reek of the town's unknowing joy. His kin squatted in shadow, twitching, flinching at every cheer outside like abused dogs with blades beneath their skins. The humans were loud today. Too loud. The festival of Sigmar's triumph had begun. Outside the barred gate, Skargor could hear everything. Boots on cobblestone, the clatter of jugs, drunken laughter. A speech was underway, some priest booming on about Sigmar's hammer, how it had crushed the wicked and made men strong. And let us never forget, he declared, that monsters can be tamed, that chaos flees before discipline and faith. A cheer, a cannon fired in celebration. One of the Ungors screamed in fury from behind the altar, smashing his horned head into the wall until blood ran down the bricks. "Silence!" Skargor snarled, spitting clots of red. "They must not know. Let them choke on their own mirth." He turned from the bars and began to read the omens. A rat's corpse had been left in offering. It lay near the shrine of Sigmar, its head crushed by stone, perhaps dropped by some clumsy child on a school tour, or perhaps by the winds of fate. Skargor cracked it open and dragged its innards across the stones. Next came wine, left too close to the gate by a careless guard the night before. Skargor lapped it up, spit it back out into his palm, and watched how it curved and pooled. Lastly, pigeon entrails, stolen from the rooftop earlier by a clever Ungor who had snuck them through a vent, wrapped in his own entrails, to appear injured. Skargor spread the bird's steaming insides across the blindfold he no longer wore. The patterns danced. He saw towers falling. He saw a fountain overflowing with arterial spray. He saw a man, perhaps a guard, perhaps a priest, his mouth filled with nails, trying to scream. And he saw the gate. Opening. Always opening. "The gods are ravenous," Skargor growled. "They want flame. They want screams. They want betrayal." That night, bonfires were lit across Gravemark. They roared like the forge of a blacksmith damned. Sparks spat into the dark sky. Children danced around them, dressed as knights and saints, waving toy hammers at one another while mothers clapped in rhythm. The ogres joined the feast, grinning, bellowing, snapping chicken bones in half with loud crunches. Boar Grunt Muckmaw drank straight from a barrel, foam clinging to his beard. He bellowed jokes about horn boys who'd tear off a man's face if you gave him half a blink, and everyone laughed. The Beastmen listened from their prison. They saw the guards become sluggish, drunk. They heard the gates open and close with little discipline. They watched the crowds thin into chaotic revelry, no longer structured, no longer patrolled. A firework launched into the sky, crimson, then green, then black. One Gore, his hooves twitching, muttered, "The sky dies with us." Skargor stood slowly, bone chains rattling. His voice slithered into their ears like a maggot burrowing. "Tomorrow we will make them speak in brays. We will make them eat their prayers. When the second bell tolls, the blood moon rises. Their joy will become meat." He smeared the pigeon's entrails across his chest like war paint and hissed toward the heavens. "Earn Gravemark, let the gods feed." Chapter 9. The Whispering Temple. The temple groaned. Its stones shifted in silence, old bones remembering their first purpose. Though men had plastered its walls with holy imagery, Sigmar's wrath, earth, the sunhammer, the pillars of law. Beneath the paint, beneath the flagstones, chaos still festered. It had not been banished. It had been buried. Skargor Mawsight knew this. He felt it the moment he was dragged into the nave in chains. The false gods above, the cracked altar, the prayers muttered by trembling priests, all were nothing but spit and cloth, trying to mask rot. Tonight, with drunken guards snoring at their posts and festival fires crackling in the distance like the town's laughter about to choke on its own tongue, Skargor moved. He peeled back the cracked floor tiles behind the altar. The other beastmen watched in tense silence, eyes gleaming, claws twitching, their hatred held on a leash for mere hours more. The stone beneath had already been softened by old blood. The floor gave with a wet crunch, revealing a shaft of cold, stale air. The smell rose like something long buried, finally exhaling. Mold, sulfur, regret. He descended. The passage was carved from living rock, wound tight like an intestine. Symbols not of man but of older things flickered along the walls, lines etched not with chisel but claw. Bones, human, beast, and something in between, lined the tunnel, jawbones nailed into the walls like mocking mouths. Skargor's hoofs clicked softly on slick stone. He walked hunched, fingers dragging blood from the gouges left by whatever had crawled here before. At the end he found it. The true altar. It pulsed beneath a root-like cage of fused bone and iron. It was not a stone, but a heart, blackened and still beating. Veins of silver light coursed through its surface. At its center, a single, unblinking eye bulged from the rock. Skargor knelt and hissed the ancient invocation, taught to him by a crow who'd spoken with 3 mouths. Flesh from rot, breath from bile, awaken now and spit your bile. The town above is fat with lies. Let chaos crawl beneath their eyes. The eye blinked, and then it spoke, not with sound, but with pressure, with visions, with blinding madness scraping his skull. You stink of purpose, little shaman. You bleed your will into stone. You wear lies like cloaks. I see you. I know your name not by tongue but by stain. Skargor grinned, froth on his lips. His claws dug into his own neck in ecstasy. Speak more. Feed me. Make me your vessel. There is a bell above. It rings once, then twice. At the second toll, the gate is flesh. Push, and it tears. There is a man with a scar who will run. Cut his legs. His scream will wake the gate. Take my gift, drink it, burn from within. The altar opened, oozing a thick ichor from the eye's pupil. It dripped like sap, hissing against the stone. Skargor did not hesitate. He cupped it, drank. Pain exploded. His back arched, his ribs cracked outward. Horns warped and split at the tips. He screamed a howl that no human throat could replicate, a braying wail that echoed without sound into the world above. His vision split. He saw Gravemark fall 1,000 ways, some slow, some fast, all soaked in blood. He saw himself, wrapped in flame and bone, leading a herd of monsters through the pulsing ruins of civilization. He saw the god things watch, amused, approving. The eye closed, and the whispering stopped. When he returned to the temple, he was hunched, twitching, steaming with unnatural heat. The other beastmen recoiled, then bowed. Skargor's muzzle was gone, rotted from his face. His teeth were longer, his eyes bled freely, but he did not blink. He raised one claw and carved a spiral into the temple wall, the first glyph of death. Tomorrow, he rasped. The gods speak with fire. Chapter 10. Rats beneath the floorboards. The floor whispered. It was faint, barely a groan, But the Beastmen heard it, not with ears dulled by flesh, but through blood, bone, and the tremor of rot in the air. It was the floor that had first spoken to Martak's snoutcleave. On the second night after the communion, he had felt it tremble beneath his chained hooves. A pulse, a beat. Not the sacred heartbeat of Morsley, but the slower, fetid rhythm of buried death. He had crawled behind the altar, dragging 2 ungors like rats on ropes, and began digging. Now on the 6th day, the floor was gone. The tunnel yawned open beneath the shattered base of a once holy statue. What remained of Sigmar's likeness now wore a broken jaw and was missing half a hammer, chewed by time, desecrated by the whispering of a forgotten god. Marthak descended first, his clawed hands slick with mold and crypt juice. The walls were wet, walls not built but grown from compacted corpses and eroded rock. The air tasted like silver and piss. Roots dangled like veins. Behind him came Skargor, crawling on all fours like a beast, though his mind burned with maddening clarity. The others followed in silence, ungors gnashing their teeth, gors dragging makeshift tools, bones sharpened to points, rusted nails twisted into claws. They passed through a cracked archway, chiseled with half-faded symbols of old Sigmarite script. "Weep not for the fallen. Their rest is sacred." That line had not aged well. The crypt beyond was a womb of dust and shadow, endless rows of hollow alcoves where forgotten bones rested, bundled in tattered burial shrouds, armored in decay. Skargor's voice echoed through the crypt like a crawling sickness. "This place sleeps. Time thought it sealed, but chaos remembers. Chaos listens, and now chaos claws its way home." The Beastmen dug, tore, ripped. They tore the crypts open not for the corpses, but for what they guarded. Centuries, old blades, dulled and flaking, hammers with heads cracked but still deadly, sigils of faith twisted by time into ironic mockeries. A half-melted longsword was thrust into the clawed hand of Ugdar's spine belt. He sniffed it, spat. "Rotted, man," he growled, "but it still cuts." One Ungor pried open a tomb with his teeth and found a rusted halberd, its edge jagged from corrosion. He grinned and immediately used it to slit the throat of a rat scurrying by. The others laughed in low, sick growls. Skargor reached into a sarcophagus bound in holy chains. He crushed the sigils with his palm and pulled free a golden censer, etched with runes long unspoken. From it he poured out dried incense and filled it with gore and bile, sealing it with a human tooth. It would become a war totem, the heart of a false priest's holy item turned into a beacon for chaos. Weapons were claimed. Chains were reforged. Bone was sharpened. And all the while the crypt seemed to smile. Hours passed. The Beastmen returned to the tunnel mouth, dragging their new arsenal behind them wrapped in funeral cloth. The dug passage was hidden beneath broken slabs and pooled blood, obscured from even the most curious guard's eye. The floor above was intact. To human ears, the temple was still, a prison holding beasts who snarled and rattled chains, unaware, broken. But beneath, in the dark, a new army waited. Their weapons were not gleaming. They were filthy, blasphemous, poisoned with rot and time, and they would kill just the same. Skargor raised the twisted censer and whispered to the gods in the old tongue. "We arm with death's remnants. When we rise, they shall fall upon the blades of their ancestors." The floor moaned once more. A warning, a promise. Chapter 11. Feast of False Peace. The sky above Gravemark was drunk. It pulsed in sick oranges and reds, as if the heavens themselves were choking on festival smoke and the gluttony of man. Bonfires danced like ritual pyres in the streets. Ale poured from casks like blood from a burst lung. Children shrieked in glee, hurling dyed eggs at straw dummies shaped like beastmen. Skargor Mawsight crouched in the darkness behind the barred gate of the temple-turned cage, eyes locked on the horizon. His muzzle had long since rotted from his face, now hidden beneath the crusted ash and filth. His breath fogged in thin strands, whispering the first lines of a chant that had not been spoken since before men first carved names into stone. The flame eats all. The horn splits the veil. Rise, rot, and consume. Around him, the herd stirred. They pressed against the walls, muscle-bound gores, twitching ungores, bestigores whose shoulders now bore hidden relic weapons beneath funeral cloth. Their bodies bulged with barely contained violence. Their claws scraped grooves into the stone floor. Muffled snarls bled from behind cracked muzzles. Skargor Mawsight dug his horn against the wall with rhythmic obsession. Let me break them. Let me taste them. The fat one with the sweets he walks past every hour. I'll tear his knees. Soon, Skargor muttered. His claws scraped symbols into the muck-covered floor. Spirals, horns, runes twisted from nightmare. He gnawed his own lip until blood mixed with chant spittle. Outside, Borgrand Mukma stood atop a wine barrel in the square. His belly jiggled as he raised a massive tankard of frothing ale. The crowd clapped, hooted, and spilled drink in sloppy cheer. "Now I ain't one for pretty speeches," Borgrand bellowed, his voice like a landslide through offal. "But let me tell you, bringing you these beastie buggers was no picnic." Laughed. The ogre raised a chain, rattling it for show. "Nearly lost me arm rustling one of the big ones down." "Ha! You'll see him in the ring tomorrow, won't you? Hope you're ready to cheer while he gets his horn snapped." The crowd erupted into delighted jeers and clapping. Skargor heard every word, every lie. Every drooling chuckle sent another tremor down his spine. He pressed both claws into the floor until he felt blood between his knuckles. Above, the bell tower rang once. The first toll. The warning. Skargor tilted his head as if sniffing the weight of the sound. It echoed through the stone like a scream swallowed in a tomb. He turned to the others. "Hold. We rot beneath their joy. We bleed beneath their praise. But soon we rise above their prayers." Within the temple, the tension became unbearable. A young Ungor foamed at the mouth. He convulsed and began braying wildly, panic and rage overflowing. A guard heard the noise and peered through the gate. Skargor met his gaze. The priestskin blindfold had slipped. Their eyes locked. The guard froze. Just for a second, just long enough to doubt. Skargor smiled, teeth caked with blood and rot. The guard shivered and turned away. The chant continued, low, persistent, beneath the volume of drunken laughter outside. A sacrifice was offered. One Ungor, too weak to hold himself together, was strangled by Ugtar Spinebelt in full view of the others. His body was smashed against the wall until his spine split. Then Skargor took a chunk of his thigh and fed it into the censer beneath the altar. Smoke billowed, black and sour, drifting through the cracks in the floor. The whispering stone beneath the temple pulsed once. The crypts below groaned, and the voices came again, brushing the minds of every beastman present. "The feast ends. The slaughter begins. The gate is soft. The bell shall ring again." The herd pressed closer to the bars now. Their backs cracked as muscles tensed to breaking. Their claws tapped with rhythm. Their lips moved in silent curses. And outside, Borgrand toasted again. "To Sigmar, to Gravemark, to the end of monsters." He laughed. The crowd cheered. The bells prepared for their second toll. And in the dark, the monsters smiled. Chapter 12. Midnight Breach. The second bell tolled. It was a deep, wet sound. Not the clean clang of celebration, but a hollow boom, like a hammer falling on a coffin lid. It rang once, then again. Louder. Heavier. Every beastman in the temple froze, not from hesitation, but from the split-second coiling before the strike, like an arrow drawn taut, like a blade waiting to drop. Then it began. Ogda's spinebelt was the first to move. He tore his chains from the wall with a scream so deep it shook dust from the cracked ceiling. His horns had been blunted, but not broken. He rammed the iron gate with his shoulder. Bones crunched, blood sprayed. The first guard, too slow, too fat with wine, had only enough time to open his mouth before Ugther bit off half his face. Another Gore leapt through the opening, grabbing a soldier and using him as a shield against a crossbow bolt, before tearing the man's throat with rusted nails. From the rear tunnel, the herd poured in, armed with tomb weapons, bone shards, and stolen blades. They burst from the crypt hole like rats from a rotting corpse. Skargor emerged last, dragging the censer of gore behind him on a rope of intestine. His mouth foamed, and his eyes shone like green moons. He howled, not a bray of instinct, but a prayer, spat to the gods of entropy. By the blood, by the horn, tear open the world and feed it. The temple became a slaughterhouse. Priests were ripped from their beds and flayed against the altar they once served. One attempted to bless a sword, only to have his arm bitten off before the words left his lips. An Ungor beat a boy acolyte to death with a censer, then wore the blood-slick robe like a cape. The gate was opened, then jammed. Orgren Muckmaw, face soaked in ale and blood, had already smashed two guards' skulls together like rotten gourds. One of his ogres hurled a corpse at the gate's mechanism, crushing the turning gear. The iron doors remained wide. "Time to earn that gold, eh?" Borgrim bellowed, wiping blood from his chin with a severed hand. "Let's see how many man-things I can squash before I'm bored." Chaos ignited. The square outside erupted. Fireworks meant to celebrate exploded in the air, their crackles masked by screams. Ale kegs were knocked over, children trampled beneath boots. Women shrieked as a horned shadow rammed through a bread stall and skewered a soldier with a spit. Then the sky opened. Thunder cracked. A storm, unnatural and sudden, rolled from the forest, heavy with green lightning and black clouds. And from beneath the trees they came. The hidden herds. Dozens, scores, perhaps hundreds. Beastmen who had stalked the outskirts, waiting for the signal. Their eyes gleamed like coals in the night. Some rode twisted stags. Others charged naked, blades raised high, braying prayers to the moon of madness. The forest vomited death into Gravemark. The first wave hit the town square. Gores smashed into festival-goers, splitting them like sacks of meat. A centaur trampled through a fire pit, scattering embers and guts. Minotaurs followed, their hoofs shaking the stones, their hammers made from wheel axles and skulls. Skargor raised his claws to the sky, bellowing into the madness. No walls will hold us. No gods will save them. Tear their cities to spine and cinder. The temple burned behind him now, engulfed in unnatural green flame. The smell of boiled faith and roasted flesh filled the streets. A child tried to crawl away. An Ungor pounced and bit through his spine. The midnight breach was complete. Gravemark was open, its veins cut, its gates torn, its lungs filling with smoke. And the beastmen were inside, unleashed, not as invaders, but as plague incarnate. Chapter 13. Streets aflame. Gravemark burned. The air was thick with screams and smoke, black clouds twisting like vines around the moon, now swollen and green with Morsleep's delight. Flames licked across rooftops, igniting banners that once celebrated Sigmar's triumph. Now they fluttered as flaming eulogies for the town's last breath. To the Beastmen, it was not destruction. It was revelation. Skargor Mawsight strode through the slaughter with his claws dripping, eyes blazing, the war cancer trailing behind him like a bloated, smoking wound. The smoke it exhaled made men stumble and cough blood before they died, cursed incense crafted from old bones and madness. He was no longer hiding. The ash was gone. The lies were shed. He was shaman, warlord, butcher, and Gravemark was his altar. The streets twisted into meat corridors. Cobblestones were slick with viscera. Inns collapsed as fire consumed their ale-soaked timbers. Men screamed within, clawing at barred windows before they were silenced by beams splitting and skulls boiling. Uthar Spinebelt hurled a guard through a second-story window, laughing as the man's body ragdolled into a fruit cart. Ungor swarmed the prone figure, devouring him alive, biting off pieces in frantic hunger, squealing with glee as his screams shrank into gargled moans. A mother ran, clutching a child. She didn't get far. A centaur burst through a smithy wall, goring her from behind and tossing the body into the flames like refuse. The child wailed. It didn't last long. Temples fell. The Temple of Verena, crushed beneath a toppled bell tower, its priest pinned and sobbing under rubble as beastmen circled, chanting. One gore slashed the man open from groin to sternum and danced in the steam that followed. Others drank from the holy font, now tainted with black ichor. The sky cracked with thunder. Green lightning split the air, striking the statue of Sigmar in the center square. Stone exploded. The hammer shattered. A mocking silence fell as the head rolled down the steps. One eye left, staring, unblinking, accusing. Skargor stepped into the square, alone. His hooves squelched through blood and broken masonry. From the smoke emerged Father Armin, the high priest of Gravemark. His eyes were wild. His hands gripped a warhammer that glowed with the last flicker of righteous magic. His robes were torn. His mouth chanted prayers too fast to hold meaning. Skargor stopped. A dozen beastmen circled the square but did not intervene. This was no brawl. This was ritual. The two locked eyes. "You filth," Armin spat. "You wear flesh like clothing. You twist mercy into mockery. You think your gods will win?" Skargor grinned. "They already have. They dance in your veins." Armin charged, hammer raised. Skargor moved like a shadow. The first blow missed. The second cracked against his shoulder, splitting hide. Black blood poured. Skargor laughed, grabbed the priest's arm and bit down, crushing bone until Armin shrieked. The priest retaliated, swinging wild. The hammer grazed Skargor's horn, slicing open his brow. Skargor's vision filled with blood. He howled, and then he struck. Claws to the gut. The hammer fell. Armin fell. Skargor climbed atop the priest, claws pinning shoulders, fangs snapping inches from his face. "Tell your god what you saw. Tell him we remember." And he ripped the man's throat out with his teeth. The beastmen roared. Around them the flames grew higher. Sigmar's broken statue smoldered behind them, and the town square became a cauldron of divine failure. Gravemark was dying, its lungs full of ash, its skin flayed open, and in its heart the herd danced. Chapter 14. Horns and Hunger. The walls wept, not with water nor rain, but with blood streaking down stone like tears from a god who had lost his kingdom. Gravemark had no more soldiers, no prayers, no hope. Only the herd, only the hunger. Skargor Mawsight stood atop a mound of pulped bodies and broken stone in the town square. Around him the fires still raged, vomiting black smoke into a sky now completely blotted by storm and Morsleep's hateful green glare. His claws were soaked, matted in gore up to the elbow. His breath steamed, each exhale a curse muttered to the dark gods. He raised the censer, still sloshing with coiled, boiling viscera and spoiled bile, and with one great bray split the air. Now, bring them forward. Build the herdstone, feed the earth. From the alleyways and the burned remnants of homes, the Beastmen drove the survivors out like livestock. Civilians, the old, the maimed, the slow, were beaten from hiding places with spear hafts and boot heels, mothers clutching the dead weight of children, priests dragging their severed stoles, merchants still holding keys to shops that no longer existed. They were herded into the square, where once Sigmar stood. Now a jagged stump remained, and around it the ground had been cleared, soaked, and anointed with agony. The herdstone was already being erected. A monolith of twisted wood and shattered gravestones, bound together by human spines, nailed with broken weapons, crowned with the splintered head of Sigmar's statue, now inverted and stuffed with feces. At its base, the Beastmen worked like ants, clawing the ground, marking it in spirals, runes, and vile glyphs smeared in urine, ash, and viscera. The blood of dozens had already been used to coat the base. More was needed. Skargor walked among the captives. He'd pressed his claw to their chests, to their heads, to their eyes. Some he marked with X's, others with spirals, and a few he simply licked. The marked ones were spared. For later. The rest were dragged screaming to the stone. The first ritual began. Googler's spine belt lifted a girl by her ankle, spinning her above the altar stone until her shrieks were just noise. Then he slammed her down onto the sharpened edge of a wheel spoke, driving it through her back. She twitched. The blood arced beautifully. Martak and Fezgor Hornchild held down a screaming merchant, as Skargor opened his chest with a jagged shard of slate, pulling free the liver, still quivering. He bit into it, chewed, swallowed. Then he smeared the juice across the stone. The earth shivered. The dark gods stirred. The square echoed with chanting now, low, wet sounds, repeated brays and moans, not in harmony but in hunger. Even the minotaurs, who spoke little, stomped in rhythm, their eyes rolled back, lips drooling. More sacrifices followed. One man begged. He offered gold, rings, maps. Skargor shoved the map down his throat until he suffocated on his own paper promises. A nun tried to pray, until Fezgor slit her tongue, fed it to an Ungor, and stuffed her mouth with her own rosary before snapping her neck and arranging her body in the shape of the Chaos Star. Children were made to watch. Some went blind from it. Others laughed. Those that laughed were recruited. Entrails were strung like garlands, draped across crumbling arches. Heads were planted on spikes taken from the town's own defenses. Blood was painted onto walls in spirals, horns, fanged moons. The town square, once a place of sermons, trade, and joy, now gurgled, alive with the breath of something wrong. The herdstone pulsed. It spoke, not in words, but in intention. A beacon. A wound in the world. Skargor stood before it, his claws outstretched, eyes wild. Gravemark is no more. It is fleshmark now. A scar upon the Empire's skin. He opened his arms and brayed to the sky. Let the wild in, let the weak rot, let cities crumble, let horns grow from walls, let the gods feast. And above, Marsleep pulsed once, and the blood glowed green. Chapter 15. Bastion of Screams. Gravemark was gutted. The streets bled. The sky howled with green fire and thunder. The townsfolk who hadn't been sacrificed now hung from shattered balconies, throats flayed into open mouths of silence. But at the far end of the town, Rising like a tumor from the stone, stood the fortress keep. The bastion. It was the last stronghold, the final wound yet uncut. Its walls were blackened from the fires, but intact. Its gates had held, shut tight behind layers of iron and desperate men. Cannon smoke curled from the turrets. Arquebus fire crackled like lightning made of spite. Inside were the survivors, soldiers, nobles, servants, whores, and cripples, all with blades, all with nowhere left to run. And the beastmen? They gathered like maggots at the base of a corpse, snarling, twitching, starved for the last bite. Skargor Mawsight crouched atop a cart of shattered stone, his hands soaked in the pulped remains of a gunner he'd just dragged screaming from a tower window. His left horn had cracked from a bullet. His right hand no longer felt sensation. He didn't care. His eyes fixed on the bastion's doors, behind which the last songs of man whimpered. He growled, "They think walls save them. Let us tear the world's womb open one more time." The ogres advanced first. Orgrond Muckmaw led the charge, pushing a siege cart crafted from 2 collapsed wagons and an entire butcher's table nailed to a tree trunk. It rolled forward with groaning wheels and no grace at all, but sheer force made it real. "Knock, knock, boys," he bellowed, slapping his gut with glee. "Time to turn your bones to stairs." Behind him, 6 more ogres advanced, dragging iron cauldrons filled with burning pitch and dead pigs soaked in lamp oil. They heaved them at the gates like grotesque bombs. When they burst, they sprayed fire and guts across the ramparts. Arquebus fire opened from above. One ogre took 3 rounds to the chest. His eyes went wide, he belched blood, and then charged anyway, tearing a gunner from the wall and using him as a club before a halberd took him in the neck. The beastmen followed, a tide of gore and claw. Gores and besticores, armed with rust-eaten swords, chipped axes, and war prayers barked through bloody maws. They howled, not in unity but in chaos, not as one force but as many snarling demons fighting their way toward meat. The gate stood strong. So they scaled the walls. Unkers climbed like rats, leaping onto battlements and dragging defenders down into the herd below. One fell, still screaming, pinned on a pike of shattered spear shafts where Marthok Snoutcleave waited, howling with joy as he peeled skin from the man's face and wore it like a scarf. Inside the bastion, the humans were feral. No more orders. No more ranks. Only survival. Cooks stabbed with meat cleavers. Priests swung candle holders and brass torches. Boys threw boiling water. Women screamed prayers that fizzled into gargles as axes found them. One noblewoman tried to negotiate, offering coin, land, even herself. Ugthar Spinebelt answered by biting her hand off and feeding it to her maid. The halls of the keep became slaughter tunnels. Smoke blinded all. Blood made the floors slick. Footing was treacherous. Blades clanged, gunshots rang, and still, the beastmen came. Skargor entered last. Not rushing. Walking. Every clawed step a drumbeat of doom. His sensors swung low, belching out corruption. His horns cracked the doorframe as he passed into the main hall. A captain of the guard met him with a 2-handed blade. He screamed something about honor, about protection, about the Empire. Skargor smiled. "Your blood is the only wall that matters now." The blade swung. Skargor caught it on his shoulder. He let it bite deep, then drove both claws into the captain's eyes, tearing downward until he split the man's face in 2 halves like a fruit. Within minutes it was over. The bastion of Gravemark was no more. Its defenders lay in piles, torn, splintered, hacked to ribbons. The hallways ran with blood. The throne room was desecrated with excrement and sigils. The town was theirs, Skargor ascended the final tower, looked out upon the burning skyline of Gravemark, and howled. The herd howled back. Morsleb pulsed once, and all below knew that Gravemark had not fallen to an army. It had been devoured. Chapter 16. Fall of Gravemark. Gravemark fell screaming. The wind howled through streets now piled with bodies and burning splinters. The scent of scorched flesh and excrement, thick blood hung like fog. Where there had once been laughter, sermons, and trade, now echoed only the wet shuffle of hooves through gore, and the groaning timber of structures begging to die. The fortress keep was the last to collapse. It came down howling, piece by piece. The ogres had smashed its walls with clubs made of uprooted trees and cart axles bound in skulls. They laughed as it cracked and moaned, pulling bricks loose with their hands, feeding mortar to their warhounds. One ogre, Bloggut, thick with gut rings and missing one eye, tied a noble to the bastion's central beam and danced while setting the lower floor alight. His roars of amusement were matched only by the screams of the man as the roof came down on him still breathing. Skargor Mawsight stood at the heart of the collapse, arms raised, claws soaked to the elbow, his censer releasing plumes of green, stinking fog into the night. Above, Morsleb turned full green, an eye wide with approval. It pulsed, once, twice, and the blood on the ground glowed in answer. The survivors ran. Packs of townsfolk, farmhands, merchants, soldiers too wounded to stand, fled into the hills, ragged and weeping, dragging children and holy relics. But the Beastmen watched them go not with anger, but laughter. They didn't chase. Not yet. Let them run, let them spread fear, let them carry the tale. Skargor whispered to Ugthar's spinebelt, "Each survivor is a fly with our rot in its mouth. Let them buzz." Ugthar snorted, still chewing on a knight's gloved hand. "They'll breed stories, lies and screams." "Good," Skargor growled. "Truth is rot, lies are plagues." The final bell tower, sacred to Sigmar, collapsed with a sound like a soul torn in half. A group of faithful had locked themselves inside, praying as the horned ones neared. The tower was dragged down with ropes and ogre hooks. It crashed inwards, crushing those within, and vomiting flame and dust into the square like a funeral pyre lit from the heavens. In the rubble, Skargor danced. He danced with the Ungors. He danced in the blood. He danced with arms wide, chanting praises to gods that chewed the stars and pissed blasphemy into time. The herdstone pulsed now, alive, thrumming with power. Relics of man were nailed to its flanks, sigils, idols, armor, skulls. The Beastmen fed it the dying, the screaming, and the unborn ripped from their mothers' bellies. Its base was a slurry of brains and belief. From the depths of the ruined temple, the whispering altar bled ichor that ran uphill, defying gravity, seeping into the stone, spreading beneath the town. The land warped. Stones twisted. Walls grew horn-like ridges. Crops in distant fields blackened overnight. The wind whispered with voices that should not exist. Gravemark was gone. Not just razed. Erased. Replaced with something feral, writhing, wrong. The Empire would look upon its maps and find a blank space where a town once stood, now only tales of horned things, of green fire, and of a moon that watched too closely. And above it all, Miroslav grinned. Its green light washed over Gravemark's corpse like a lover caressing a bruise. And the Beastman began to howl again. Not for war, but for celebration. Chapter 17. The Horned Feast. Gravemark was dead. Its bones had been cracked. Its spirit bled out. The bells had fallen silent, their tongues torn and melted into slag. The wind that once carried hymns now dragged the reek of rot and fire through the alleyways, like a feral dog tugging at a corpse's entrails. But for the Beastmen, it was not an ending. It was a feast. The square, where once children had danced and peddlers had bickered, was now the womb of the herdstone. The corrupted altar, cobbled from shattered statues and bones of slaughtered innocents, stood in the exact center, where the streets crossed in a cruciform pattern. Its spine was the split remains of Sigmar's statue. Its veins were ropes of intestine stretched taut from broken lampposts. Its crown was a ring of screaming heads, still living, their tongues cut out, their eyes replaced with moss and wax to keep them from looking upon the god's arrival directly. Skargor Mawsight stood before it, nude save for a veil of flayed faces stitched together into a cape. His chest was smeared with soot and gore and ritual spirals. He gripped his censer in one hand and a priest's femur carved into a fluting horn in the other. He blew the horn. The feast began. The surviving beastmen howled, clawed the air, and fell to all fours, braying like creatures possessed. Some rolled in the muck. Some began to mate. Others simply screamed, smashing fists and hooves into the corpses piled around the square. Fires were lit, not for warmth, but for display. Atop the flames, burning bundles of children's toys, holy books, and limbs were strung like offerings to the dark gods. Screaming captives were impaled upon spears and roasted alive while ungors danced in circles, painting each other with smoke-black and hot blood. A group of bestigers dragged a priest's corpse across the square, tied it to a wheelbarrow, and launched it into the air with a mangled catapult. It slammed against the side of the chapel, burst like a meat fruit, and slid down the stone wall in wet streaks. Laughter, joy, ecstasy. Then came the others. From the forests and cliffs beyond Gravemark, the other herds arrived. From the east, goat-skinned warriors bearing banners stitched from empire cloaks. Their leader carried a shield made from a kneecap the size of a dinner plate. From the north, a war band of mutant tuskhounds, dragging a priestess by her own braids, singing brays in discordant choir. From the caves to the west, a minotaur tribe, taller than houses, reeking of ash and unboiled fat. Their hooves crushed stone. One was blind and followed the scent of fear alone. They approached the square, and upon seeing the herdstone, fell to their knees in reverence, striking the ground with skulls as offerings. "Blood sings," one Bray-Shaman whispered, licking a chunk of charred rib. "More sleep watches," another hissed, scratching at his scabs. "The rot has roots now. It will grow," grunted a towering bestigar, chewing a bishop's ring. At the center of it all, Skargor raised his arms. His voice broke into a scream, then a chant, then a series of brays so guttural the air itself twitched. "We are the true people. The earth is our mother. The moon is our father. Their cities are scabs on the flesh. We are the fist. We are the flame. We are the horned feast." They echoed him, braying, screaming, pounding the stone until it cracked. The skulls were mounted. Every victim's skull, every guard, priest, child, noble, and soldier was split and cleaned with claws, piss, and fire. Some were dipped in black ichor, others painted in feces and dye. They were nailed to the spire of the herdstone, dozens, then hundreds, rising like a tree of grinning, silent ancestors. When it was done, and the final drop of blood smeared across the glyphs, the herdstone throbbed, pulsing like a second heart. A low sound emanated from it. Not a growl, not a hum, a laugh. A deep cosmic chuckle, so low it shook the beastmen's bones and made the ogres pause their gluttony. Skargor smiled. The gods had answered, and the night wore on, lit not by stars, but by flame and madness. By morning, the square would be sticky with congealed sacrifice. The walls would echo with moans and brays. In Gravemark, it would be known only in whispers, as the place where the horned ones fed. Chapter 18. Purging the Unworthy. The herdstone pulsed, but not with joy. It throbbed with warning. The blood was not yet cool on the stones. The feast still bubbled in the gut of the earth. Morrisleib hung low, green and gloating, yet in the air the beastmen sniffed discord. "Too many mouths," growled Ugathar, sharpening bone against stone. "Too many claws, not enough prey," hissed Marthak, gnawing on his own knuckle. The new herds that had arrived for the feast now lingered too long, their hungers unsated, their warlords bristling beneath their trophies and guttural boasting. One by one they began to challenge. They called Skargor Moonmocker, whispered that his fake chains were the ways of man, that he had led them with deceit, not blood, and worse. They said the minotaurs were uneasy. They gathered in the crypts below, where the stones still stank of human death, where the whispering altar bled quiet and thick. There, beneath the ashen bone dust, minotaurs stirred. 3 herds of them, barely restrained since the fall of Gravemark, their hooves cracking tomb tiles, their fists itching for slaughter. The largest of them, a beast called Gorbrak One-Eye, whose horns were fused into a jagged crown, roared rebellion. "No more games. No more words. The shaman hides behind chains. The strong shall rule." His bellowed challenge echoed through the crypts, shaking bones from the walls, waking the half-dead and the maggot-numbed. Skargor did not answer with words. He answered with ritual. He descended alone, dragging behind him 2 screaming ungors, bound in thornvine, their tongues removed. The crypt lit with green flame as he slashed their throats over the altar and bathed his claws in their lifeblood, reciting the chant in a language older than man, beast, or god. Spiral of tooth? Spiral of flame? Let rot devour order, let wrath wear horns. The blood hissed, the whispering altar groaned, its eyes split open again. And Skargor changed. His back cracked, growing ridges. His horns curled backward and split. His teeth grew like tusks. His blood dripped in rhythm with the altar's heartbeat. His eyes smoked. He turned to Gorbrak and the others, now dozens, stamping in frenzy. And he leapt. The battle was not fought. It was butchery. The first minotaur who charged had his throat ripped open before he struck. Skargor moved like flame in wind, cutting, biting, tearing. One bellowed and lifted a pillar to crush him. Skargor rolled beneath and clawed out the beast's guts, pulling its own intestines over its eyes like a blindfold, before snapping its spine with a headbutt. Gorbrak landed a blow, shattering Skargor's shoulder with a stone club. Skargor bit his wrist and tore off his own ruined limb, howling with joy. "A gift for the gods," he shrieked, before plunging a rusted bone dagger into Gorbrak's throat. Then, with his only hand, he shoved the minotaur's own horn into his chest, twisting until it pierced his heart. Gorbrak stumbled and fell. Then, the crypt was painted red, flesh steaming, hooves twitching, broken tusks littering the floor like shattered roots. Silence. Then one of the younger minotaurs dropped to its knees. Another followed. Soon all who remained knelt. Skargor, breathing through blood and smoke, raised the censer once more. The strong lead. The clever survive. The rest are food. Above, the herds watched from the square as the blood smoke rose through the broken grates. They did not speak of rebellion again. The unworthy had been purged. The herd was one again. And Skargor, twisted and wounded, stood atop their backs, shaman and tyrant, his stump cauterized with fire, his mind aflame with visions of more cities to come. Chapter 19. The Witch of Broken Glass. They smelled her before they saw her. Not the musk of beast or the rot of man, but something thin, a scent like lightning on glass and the sweat of a dying star. The winds bent wrong as she neared. The ash on the ground whispered, trees knotted themselves tighter, and the birds flew in silent flocks, veering wide of the smoking ruins of Gravemark. It was Skargor who first sensed her, twitching violently in his sleep, foaming at the stump of his shoulder, the wound blackened with runes and crusted in minotaur blood. His dreams hissed in unseen tongues, and something cold traced its fingers along the inside of his skull. He awoke with a roar, eyes burning, nostrils flaring. She comes. Not prey, not foe, something sideways. They found her in the ruins of the old apothecary, where the glass still shimmered green from the warp heat of the herdstone. Bottles cracked like skulls underfoot. Mirrors blinked when no one looked. She stood amid the shards, tall, impossibly thin, clothed in robes of ragged silk and hair that flowed like shadows in water. Her face was carved, not born, angular, sharp, a smile that knew too much. Her skin shimmered faintly like a scab stretched too thin over bone. The beastmen growled, surrounding her like jackals around a strange flame. Ugathar bared his fangs. Fesgor twitched his blade. Several ungors began snarling instinctively. She didn't flinch. She raised one long, talon-fingered hand, and the air itself shivered. "Be still, sons of horns. I come for the storm." Skargor stepped forward, his censer belching fog, his broken horn glistening. His voice was cracked, scraped raw from days of screaming prayer and bleeding sacrifice. "Witch," he spat. "Elf thing, why do you crawl toward fire? You smell of fear and secrets." She inclined her head, black eyes reflecting only green flame. "Because your fire sings. It reaches into the void and stirs things not yet born." She walked between the beastmen as if they were reeds, her feet leaving no imprint in blood. "Gravemark is no more. In its grave you've planted something vast. It calls across the skein, it howls, and I hear it." Skargor hissed. "You want its power. You want to twist it with words and silk." "I want to nurture it," she purred. "You've killed a city, but if you let me, I'll teach you how to kill empires." The beastmen muttered. Some twitched. Some drooled. One leapt. A young Gor, stupid with hunger and pride, charged with a war blade made from a snapped thigh bone. She raised her hand. He exploded. Not in fire or light, but inward. Every bone in his body crushed to powder in an instant, as if reality had remembered him wrong. She smiled gently. "I do not forgive poor manners." Skargor watched the smear that used to be gore twitch on the ground. Then he nodded. "What do you want?" She turned to him, her shadow bending the other way. "I want flesh, not to eat, to read. Give me your dead, your broken, your things that no longer scream. I'll carve from their bones spells to curse cities. I'll stitch from their sinews a veil to hide your herds. I'll drink from their eyes and dream the places that fear you. And I will teach you things even the gods forgot." Skargor grinned. "Take them, carve them, make their deaths speak." He gestured to a pile of corpses, unworthy minotaurs, old nobles, limp priests, still fresh. She bowed. She did not thank him. She began her work that night. The Witch of Broken Glass moved into the shattered tower once used for stargazing, now slick with soot and dripping blood from its cracked dome. Inside she etched runes with fingernails, whispered to shadows that hissed back, and bound dead mouths into tomes. Some ungors went missing. Some came back, wrong. Eyes in the wrong place, words backward. One blinked sideways and said nothing else ever again. But no one challenged her. Not now. Not yet. She was useful. And as Skargor stood atop the herdstone, watching green lightning ripple across the broken sky, he whispered, "The gods send tools, even if they are made of glass." Chapter 20. Eyes of the Empire. The flies moved first. They buzzed harder, faster. Their wings hummed with tension, skipping between smoldering corpses and cracked statues, gathering around fresh scents of fear. Then came the crows. They did not caw. They watched. Then the man. He was lean, ragged in green and gold, a scout of the Empire crawling through the charred skeleton of Gravemark. His uniform was blackened at the edges, but still bore the comet of Sigmar, faded beneath a layer of sweat, soot, and panic. He had seen too much. The crucified remains. The herdstone, pulsing like a womb of bone and bile in the town square. The blood-slicked gates, still twitching from the corpses nailed to them. He fled. He didn't see the Ungors trailing him, darting like lice through ruined alleyways. He didn't smell the spore blood trail they left him on purpose. He didn't hear Skargor whispering from the tower top. Let him run. Let the eye open. Let the enemy come. And so the Empire learned. They came in vengeful preparation, riders galloping with scrolls of warning, soldiers amassing under banners, pistols loaded with silver rounds, warriors praying harder than they'd ever prayed in lives devoid of godly witness. But they would not arrive yet. Skargor had time, and he would not wait idle. Gravemark was remade. Not rebuilt, but refleshed. Skargor called it the horn cyst. He stood in the town square, green lightning dancing across the herdstone, and spat blood onto the map of Gravemark sketched in bone char and ash. "No more streets," he hissed. "No more corners. No more lines." Beastmen tore down what still stood. Walls were pulled apart, then rebuilt with twisted intent, angled to confuse, to funnel prey, to blind archers and mislead scouts. Broken buildings became death corridors, filled with spike pits and corpse piles that screamed when disturbed. Benches were collapsed or trapped. Wells were poisoned, with blood, bile, and worse. Church steeples were turned upside down and nailed together, forming antennae that pulsed with warp light. The witch of broken glass etched glyphs into their stones, and the wind screamed through them, carrying whispers that rotted teeth and sent birds crashing from the sky. At Skargor's command, the Minotaurs dug trenches in the ash, filled with corpses preserved in brine and slush. Should attackers breach the gate, the pits would burst, unleashing disease, flame, or things that should not crawl. The watch trees were raised, dead bodies bound to poles, heads tilted back, eyes removed and replaced with beetles. The insects swarmed in formation whenever danger neared. The Ungors muttered, "The beetles see." Skargor patrolled barefoot, claws scraping, watching every transformation with a snarl of pride. He fed ideas to builders with foaming lips and clawed their backs open when they hesitated. This town was a tumor. We cut it out. Now we make a mop. A mouth the Empire will choke on. The witch hissed her warnings. The soldiers come, big ones, with thunder on their backs. Good, Skargor thought. Let them come. Let them see what civilization looks like after its soul is peeled away. Let them walk streets that scream underfoot where windows bleed and doorways bite. Let them charge, thinking this is war. Let them learn this is rot. Chapter 21. The Fanged Moon Rises. They called it the Fanged Moon. Not the manlings. They had no name for what hung in the sky that night, black where it should be light, torn and veined like a rotting fruit turned inside out. Morslib swelled and devoured the sun, and for a span of time that felt like an eternity drowning in blood, the world was cloaked in sick green shadow. To the Beastmen, it was omen and orgasm, death bell and birth howl. It was the God-scar revealed, a sky mouth opening wide to breathe life into monsters. Skargor Mawsight stood atop the herdstone, arms spread, horn stump dripping fresh blood. His skin cracked under the glow, shedding ash like dead bark. His breath came in hissing gouts of smoke. He brayed once, and the herd answered. The air twisted. Trees around Gravemark's edges bent unnaturally, their bark splitting to reveal pale meat, dripping with black sap. The ground heaved like lungs full of fluid, rupturing in places, spewing forth eggs, not laid by creature, but by spite. From these sacs came new beastmen, born not of womb, not of rutting, but of hate and warp-light. They clawed free with mucus-coated fingers, their horns soft, their eyes white, yet they screamed with purpose. They bit the earth as soon as they breathed it. Ungors were born in clumps, some fused, some bloated with extra mouths. A few died on emergence, but the ones who lived tore the corpses apart and ate them, screeching thanks to the green sky above. Gors followed, howling, foaming, tearing at their own skin to test its thickness. One ripped his own eye out just to prove he was not weak. Another beat his twin to death with an umbilical cord. Minotaurs came last. 2 emerged from the collapsed well where once the town's children had played. Their horns snapped stone. Their hooves sank into the blood-soaked soil, steam rising with each breath. Skargor marked their foreheads with burnt fat and old tears. Born from the moon, born for the flame, kill the past, burn the future. The old herd rejoiced. They surrounded the newborns like zealots at a shrine, pressing against them, biting, bleeding, welcoming them with pain. One Bray-Shaman opened his own belly and fed the contents to a clutch of newborn ogres, babbling praises to the green-eyed twin gods who kill each other each night. The Witch of Broken Glass stood atop the charred chapel spire, arms open to the sky, her mouth split wide into a grin as long as her forearm. Her eyes had turned black. She wept tears that sang when they struck stone. "The rot breathes true now," she whispered. "The veil is torn. The herd will no longer need to breed. They will be vomited from the soil itself." Skargor howled again, and from every corner of the corrupted Gravemark, now called Fleshmark by the herd, more beastmen emerged. From the tunnels, from the crypts, from within the warped corpses of fallen humans, which cracked open like husks. The army grew, twice their number, then thrice. Some malformed, some perfect in savagery, all hungry, all blessed. Morslib shone above, no longer content to be a moon. Tonight it was a tooth, and the world was a throat, and the beastmen, they would devour. Chapter 22. Chains for the Future. The fires were low, but the smell still hung thick. Not the sweet reek of fresh slaughter, no, that was gone now. What remained was the fugue of rot, of blood dried into dust, of burned hope crackling between ash and bone. It was time to feed the flame elsewhere. The ogres gathered in the ruins of the northern gate, fat, content, swatting flies off their bloated bellies with severed arms like fans. Their maws were stained with black wine and wet meat, their sacks bulging with plunder and people. Ogrond Mukmar stood before Skargor with a grin too wide for his face. "A fine bit of carnage, Hornface. Right proper feast for the gods, eh? Got enough manling squealers to keep my lads busy till the next moon turns to slime." Behind him, wagons groaned under the weight of chained survivors, priests, farmers, even young ones. Some still sobbed, others just stared, hollow and twitching. The ogres would sell them, use them, grind them. Skargor cared not. The fate of meat after the butchering was irrelevant. But he watched them closely, always watching. The ogres were not kin. They were useful, not trusted, and their usefulness was nearing its end. Borgrand laughed and reached out a greasy hand. "We'll be taking our gold now, eh? And I'll be leaving this place before it grows teeth in its walls." Skargor nodded once. He gestured to an Ungol who dragged forward a sack of blood-soaked coins, mostly stolen, some melted into fused lumps. "Tainted with warp smear, cursed with Skargor's spit." Borgrand didn't care. Gold was gold. He hefted it, sniffed it, bit it. One of his tusks cracked on contact with the enchanted coin. He howled. Skargor smiled. But the ogres didn't notice what Skargor kept. A map, torn from the back of a dead cartographer, worn, crumpled, smeared in feces but still legible beneath the stink. A road map of the southern towns, outposts along the trade routes that led to Templestein, Rothwald, Monton by Water. He stared at it with both eyes, and something deeper. These were veins, still uncut. Meat waiting behind walls, children in pews, soldiers blind with pride. "New wounds to slit open," Skargor murmured. As the ogres rumbled out of Fleshmark, dragging their moaning cargo toward their next greedy stop, Skargor turned back to the square, where the herdstone pulsed like a tumor with a heartbeat. The new Beastmen, freshly born beneath Morsleb, snarled and fought among the wreckage, already growing stronger, already hungrier. He raised the map, scratched a bloody line from Gravemark to the south. He whispered to it, "You are not the last. You are the first scream. The rest will be echoes." Chains were for the weak, but sometimes they were for the future, and Skargor would shatter them only after he dragged them through fire. Chapter 23. Warhorn Echoes. There are many ways to start a war. Some start with armies on the march, some with a king's decree. The Beastmen preferred a scream of brass and bone that would split the sky and make mountains twitch. In the gutted heart of Fleshmark, beneath the rotting teeth of the herdstone, and in full view of Morsleb's still-bleeding eye, the Beastmen forged a Brayhorn. Not just any, a great one. The bell was taken from the wreckage of Gravemark's chapel, twisted, cracked, half-melted from green fire, and still engraved with prayers to Sigmar that now read like blasphemies under the light of chaos. They dragged it screaming through the ash-choked square, tearing up flagstones as it moved, the metal howling like a creature in pain. Skargor Mawsight walked beside it, bleeding from the eyes, chewing on a strip of priest skin and chanting in rhythm with the bell's groans. They boiled the bronze in a pit carved into the earth, filled with fat from the unworthy and piss from the minotaurs, stirring it with halberd poles and cracked holy symbols. When the metal bubbled, the witch of broken glass approached. She didn't speak. She whispered to the heat, and it flared green, screaming without voice, splitting two Ungers' heads just from proximity. The molten mass took shape, poured into a bone mold built from ribs and sharpened femurs. Not symmetrical, not smooth. Perfect. The Brayhorn. It was an unholy beast of a thing, twisted like a ram's horn, wide enough at the mouth to swallow a man whole. Its surface glistened with charred prayers, warped and smeared into chaos glyphs. Inside it were the tongues of 12 priests, bound in chains and allowed to rot. At the tip of the horn was fused the broken bell's clapper, now recast into a knob of bone, bronze, and teeth. It breathed. Not air, but intention. It did not just sound. It spoke. When Skargor blew it, the world shuddered. He climbed the broken tower of Gravemark's town hall, his hooves leaving prints in stone. the horn strapped to his back with a harness of intestines. Atop the peak, beneath the maddening glow of Morsleib, he lifted it to his mouth, jaw stretching, blood seeping from the seams of his face as he bellowed the first breath. The sound that emerged was not music. It was a bray of ending, a thunderous, lowing roar that tore through the clouds and stripped bark from trees 20 miles distant. Windows shattered. Birds fell from the sky mid-slight, their skulls pulped. Far across the border princes, in places untouched by flame, hidden herds stirred. In the caves of the drowned hills, bestigers awoke snarling, their horns glowing faintly green. In the deep briarwood, a war herd trapped beneath root and rock burst free, breaking their ancient stone prison with renewed rage. In the ruins of Klossheim, a lone Bray-Shaman looked up, eyes glowing, his herd braying in harmony. And in the Razorback Valley, a vast minotaur, chained and buried beneath a forgotten battlefield, opened his eyes for the first time in centuries. They heard the horn, and they remembered who they were, what they were. They turned south, and toward the flame, toward the spiral, toward Fleshmark. Skargor lowered the horn, blood streaming from his mouth, ears deafened by his own fury. He laughed. Below, the herd howled. The world would come to them now, not to save, not to help, but to bleed. Chapter 24. Herd of many paths. The ground cracked, not from hooves alone, but from purpose. The Brayhorn's echo had not just carried across valleys and hills, it had burrowed into the world, like a maggot into a bloated corpse, waking every rot mind, every broken-horned sleeper, every hidden patch of hate-wearing fur. They came, not as one. Never that. They came as a converging disease, 1,000 weeping blisters, all bleeding toward the same wound. From the gristle hollows came the Tuskors, low of brow, muscle-bound, their hides thick with tumors and fungus rashes. They grunted with each step, tongues lolling, chained together with ropes of sinew. Their bray herd wore no armor, only paint, thick globs of ichor smeared in symbols that burned the skin of man. Skargor met their leader, a thing called Barshvol, whose snout was split in two like an axe wound. He did not speak words, only bleated through a pipe made of finger bones, a noise that made teeth ache. He bowed once before the herdstone, and was accepted. From the storm-gullet hills came the Centaurs, snarling and wild, drunk on fermented flesh wine. Their hooves sparked as they galloped into Fleshmark, trampling corpses and bellowing songs of butchery. They circled the herdstone like wolves, spears raised, tails slashing, mouths foaming. One defecated on a Sigmarite banner and smeared it across his flanks like armor. Their chieftain, Skargor Many-Tongues, spoke in riddles and curses, licking ash from Skargor's stump hand in some crude form of respect. They howled, and were accepted. From the deeper dark, from the sunless glades, came things unfit for names. One came slithering, its body coiled in scales and fur, its head a crown of blind eyes, its tongue speaking in glyphs that shimmered across the air. A Jabba-Slythe. It did not walk, it oozed. Trees withered as it passed. Beastmen tore out their own ears when it shrieked. Even the minotaurs growled low, uncertain, unsure. But Skargor bowed to it, and it blinked, and was accepted. More came. Gorgons, twice the height of ogres. Teeth like grave markers, eyes like wet glass, dragging weapons made of wagon wheels and crucified men. Zorger packs, squealing in chaos-born rage, chewing through the bones of the dead and defecating their armor. Hunger scouts, lean and rabid, who ran messages in blood carved into their backs. Leaping through flames like hounds of prophecy. They came hungry, torn, disfigured, each a mockery of nature, each carrying some tale of fire, of vengeance, of gods with no mercy. And Skargor stood atop the herdstone, watching, his body scarred, his mind louder than ever. His eye, now blind with rot, still saw. More than sight. It saw paths. He raised his claw and brayed. You are all filth. You are all mine. Not one herd, many teeth, one mouth. The world is soft. We are the bite. They screamed. He stopped. They began to chant. Many horns, one hunger. Many horns, one hunger. Many whores, one hunger. The fields turned to mud under their steps. The wind grew sour. And far away the Empire's torches lit the hills. But they were too late. Because the herd had come together, and it would tear the world apart. Chapter 25. The Sigmarite Crusade. It began at dawn. Not the soft golden warmth of a summer's morning, no. This dawn came bleeding through storm clouds, thick with smoke, bile-colored lightning crackling along the horizon. The air itself tasted like rust, the land already pregnant with slaughter. The Empire had come. They called it a crusade, a holy retaking, an act of redemption. It was an army, true enough. Rows of knights in gleaming armor, standards of Sigmar and the twin-tailed comet snapping in the wind. Fanatics marched in barefoot, eyes rolled back, swinging censers of boiling tar. Cannons rolled behind them, flanked by pikemen and warrior priests. Their faces were pale. Some wept. But Skargor saw them not as warriors. They were meat, in armor. The call had gone out across the Empire. Gravemark has fallen. Beastmen defile its bones. And so they came. The Order of the Blazing Sun, Templars of the Hammer Reborn, and countless provincial militias, all converging upon the desecrated ruin now known only as Fleshmark. Skargor stood atop the blackened corpse of the chapel, his blind eye weeping rot, his claw gripping the brayhorn. Around him, the herd had gathered, a churning ocean of horns, claws, tusks, and unquenchable rage. Behind them, flesh-marked, was a maze of spikes and filth, twisted alleys turned to traps, walls restructured with the bones of their victims. The ground had been seeded with barbs, broken blades, and corpses waiting to rise. This would be no siege. This would be a feast. They came with trumpets. The Empire. Drums, banners, chants. Their knights rode in rows, lances gleaming, horses foaming, shields adorned with saints and false gold. They called upon Sigmar. They called upon vengeance. They didn't know they were galloping into hell's mouth. The brayhorn sounded, and the world cracked. From the streets and gutters poured the herd. Minotaurs, bellowing like collapsing towers, smashed into cavalry lines, sending horses and riders airborne, their armor crushed around bone like wet bark. Centaurs sprinted in circles, smashing pikemen from the sides, kicking heads from shoulders. Tuskors trampled the screaming wounded, their mouths foaming with warp-born hunger. The witch-fire of the Witch of Broken Glass ripped through the Empire's rear lines, her laughter echoing from every broken window as her spells turned men to screaming ash and folded flesh inside out. Skargor himself descended into the fray, one hand missing, the other clawed and drenched in prayer blood. He leapt upon a knight from above, crushing his helmet inward with a single stomp. Another swung a holy hammer. Skargor caught the shaft with his teeth, bit through it, and drove a bone blade through the man's throat. Every strike he made was a curse, every howl a command. The Empire pushed hard. Their lines did not break immediately. They held. For hours the battle roared. Cannons blasted down minotaurs. Knights trampled gores into mulch. Priests screamed prayers so loud they burst their own vocal cords, channeling divine light that scalded beastmen where they stood. But it wasn't enough. Not against chaos made flesh. The final breach came when the Gorgon charged, 4 stories tall, made of sinew and madness. It burst from the eastern ruins like a god of slaughter, tearing down the gate, grabbing a cannon in both hands, and using it to club the knight marshal into soup. Then it roared, shaking dust from the skies, and split a church tower in half with its horns. The empire faltered. The priests died first, torn from their pulpits, smeared across cobblestone like paint. The knights broke soon after. Their last stand? A dozen brave fools around a ruined fountain trying to hold a line against a tide of braying monsters. They were buried beneath a rain of spears, arrows, and flaming dogs. And then, silence. The wind howled. A trumpet lay crushed, its final note blood-choked. The crusade was over. Gravemark, Fleshmark, was never retaken. Skargor walked among the corpses. He found the knight marshal's broken helm. He spat into it. "Your gods bled well today?" He raised his claw, dripping with knight's brains. The herd howled. The world would not forget this night. It would never forgive it. But the Beastmen didn't want forgiveness. They wanted ruin. Chapter 26. Battle beneath the horns. The sky was no longer sky. It was a wound, split by chaos magic, weeping light and darkness, its edges pulsing with green fire and screaming wind. Morrisley loomed above, fatter now, its light not illuminating but infecting, washing over Fleshmark with a sickly glow that boiled shadows into things that whispered. The town bled again, not from siege, not from starvation, but from war reborn. They had come again. More men, more steel, more prayers. An elite detachment, reinforcements from Altdorf, engineers with precision machines, warhorses clad in full barding, and battle wizards wrapped in runes of protection. They thought themselves ready. They came at dawn, when they believed the Beastmen would be asleep, drunk on slaughter and moonlight. Instead, they found Skargor waiting. The first cannon blast shattered a tower. Dust and bricks vomited across the square. A minotaur staggered sideways, its jaw torn off by the impact. It didn't fall. It grabbed the nearest Ungor, shoved the smaller creature into its gaping throat, and charged again, frothing from its broken face. More thunder. Steel, flame, grit. Men with halberds advanced in square formations, boots stomping in rhythm. Their banners fluttered with comets and silver skulls. Order, discipline. They thought it would save them. Skargor's horns cracked lightning. He strode into the fray barefoot, dragging his censer, which now held a sloshing stew of blood, bile, teeth, and a single still-beating heart, its thumps in time with his pulse. The witch of broken glass floated above the chapel ruins, her robes tangled in wind that did not blow. She screeched words that shredded the skin of those who heard them. Her spells fell like hail. One burst into inverted fire, freezing from within. Another turned men to glass, who shattered mid-scream under their own weight. A third made horses vomit their entrails and flee without heads. And then the minotaurs charged. Like living siege weapons, they plowed through pikemen, snapping spears like twigs. One picked up a cannon, still smoking, and hurled it through a unit of engineers, crushing them like paste. Another gored a knight's horse, then used the steed's spine as a flail, screaming in a voice that wasn't a voice at all, just rage echoing through meat. The war horses didn't falter. They were trained, bred for horror, but they'd never seen this. Some held, most shattered. The earth cracked. Skargor felt the magic surge beneath his hooves, the very soil weeping filth and green fire. He drove his claws into it, pulling power up like blood from a wound. He hurled it into the nearest warpriest, a bolt of rot light, a jagged, coiling lance of chaos that pierced armor and exploded him from within. His body bloomed into a flower of screaming flesh, every petal a finger, every whisper a prayer that would never end. The beastmen howled in laughter. The humans rallied for a moment, shields locked, chanting. Then came the centaurs, hooves aflame, axes swinging, crashing into the flanks. The formation buckled, screams were choked by steel and hoof, men drowned in mud and blood and horse piss. The elite detachment fell as quickly as the rest, only slower, more painfully. By nightfall the town had bled again. The square ran slick. Gore bubbled in the wells. The fountain had become a meat shrine, its water pink, its basin filled with torn limbs arranged in sacred spirals. Skargor walked among the corpses. He stepped on a surviving officer's chest. The man coughed blood, eyes flickering. He gasped. Why this? Skargor leaned close, his voice like splitting bark. Because you're still trying. Then he drove a broken sword through the man's open mouth and out the back of his skull. Fleshmark held, but the world now knew it wouldn't fall again. Not while the horns still rose. Not while chaos still bled. Not while the Beastmen remembered. Chapter 27. The Shaman's Choice. Skargor bled black. His breath came ragged, each inhale a rasp of shattered bone and bubbling fluid. His body, scarred, cracked, reeking, lay hunched beneath the altar of the herdstone, surrounded by bones and war spit, by cursed blood still steaming in sacred pools. The cannon blast had done its work. A chunk of his ribs had been turned to paste. His side sagged like a split wineskin. His arm, already half flesh, half curse, twitched with a will not entirely his own. But he still lived. And worse, he still thought. Too much. The battle had ended. The Empire's latest crusade lay scattered across the square, their horses gutted, their saints hung from the chapel's crumbling tower like offerings to hungrier gods. But there was no triumph in Skargor's snarl, only the pull, only the voice. The demon beneath the altar, the thing that had slumbered in the stone since before the chapel was ever built, since before Gravemark had a name, it called, and it demanded payment. He had felt it growing ever since his first chant in the fens, since the taste of pigeon entrails and burning wine, since he dared raise his voice in the temple of man. Each victory fed it. Each death honored it. Each act of desecration carved a wound in the veil, and now the thing behind it wanted its due. It spoke without voice. Its words came in pressure, in bubbling rot behind the eyes, in images of eyes within eyes, skin peeling into mouths, moons vomiting shadows. You walk in my light, beast of ash. You speak my tongue, child of horn. Now choose, your soul or your war. Skargor wheezed. He coughed black and laughed blood. It's not a choice. He stood, shaking, swaying, leaking. His claws scraped runes into the altar stone, old sigils, ones not taught by Bray-Shamans, but whispered by carrion crows and written in the birthmarks of stillborn ungors. He bit off his tongue, chewed it, swallowed it. Then he screamed, not with voice, but with spirit. The altar cracked. Fleeting green light. From the broken stone oozed a shape not whole, not real. A mass of tendrils, of eye teeth and crow skulls, of infant hands and serpentine tongues. It crawled not into the world, but through it, like a blade through cloth. It touched Skargor. and the wound in his chest closed. Not with healing, but with change. His skin blackened, his horns lengthened and split like tree branches, his jaw cracked wider. One eye withered, the other grew, glowing like a furnace. He howled, and all who heard it howled with him, dropping to their knees, clawing at their own faces. The sky above rippled. Morsely flared. Skargor fell forward, steaming, twitching, reborn. He was no longer just a shaman. He was chosen, and behind his eyes now sat a throne of flame and bone, upon which his demon watched and grinned. His soul? Gone. But the war would be eternal. Chapter 28. Grave of Men. The banners no longer flew. They lay buried in mud and shit, torn to strips, their holy comets and suns now little more than stained rags tangled around spears and bone-split limbs. Steel helms filled with moss and flies, breastplates gnawed by scavenger teeth. Fleshmark had become a grave, but not for beastmen, not for monsters. It was now the grave of men. There would be no more crusades, no more regiments marching in neat lines, no more priests barking courage into shaking recruits. No more orders from Altdorf, no more vengeance sent from thrones. The Empire had tried, with knights, with faith, with gunpowder and pageantry, but all it had done was feed the earth. The land changed, the borders warped, maps curled and cracked, names faded, roads that once led to Gravemark now twisted in on themselves or simply ended in wilderness where no light touched. The trees grew wrong, their bark like scarred skin, their leaves slick with pus. Crows with too many wings perched upside down, staring at nothing. The winds carried whispers, not words, not warnings. Laughed, soft, distant, wet. Where once farms dotted the hills, now herds of ogres roamed, rutting and butting, dragging the corpses of old scarecrows with them as trophies. Where once temples stood, now pools of tar bubbled, coughing up bones that twitched. Where once bells rang in the morning to rouse the faithful, now only the brayhorn echoed across the plains, a scream that never faded, a sound that found ears even where no life remained. And the beastmen? They spread, like mold across bread, like rot through wound. No longer skulking in the fens, no longer raiders in the night. Now they moved, openly, boldly, through cursed meadows and ghost roads, torching every village too slow to run, marking stones with entrails, raising miniature herdstones wherever the grass dared grow straight. Every fire they lit was a prayer. Every body they broke was a tithe. Skargor Mawsight walked at the head of the procession, twice the creature he once was, his frame swollen with chaos favor, his horn split thrice over like a tree root, his claw now fused with bone metal, forever dripping ichor. He didn't walk as a beastman anymore. He walked as a curse. They passed the wreckage of the last Crusader's outpost, a charred watchtower surrounded by bloated corpses arranged in spirals. Skargor paused. He picked up a rusted sword, snapped it in half, spent on it, then raised his claw to the sky. There are no men here, only mate and memory. The herd howled, and the world trembled. Gravemark was gone, no longer a town, no longer a place. It was now a wound in the world, an ever-bleeding testament to what happens when man forgets fear. And the beastmen? They had no king, no court, no temple. But now they had dominion, and they would not stop, because the grave of men was only the first. Chapter 29. The Beast King of Gravemark. The wind blew red that day, not with dust, with scabs flaked from the sky like dandruff from a diseased god. The land was already warped, twisting like a corpse left too long in a river. Trees moaned, the earth bled when hooves stomped it. Stones cracked open to reveal eyes. And, atop it all, where the temple once stood, rose the crown spire. A monument of bone and ruin, fused with warp fire and the shattered altar stone, soaked in the remains of priests, soldiers, and saints. Around it the Beastmen gathered, shoulder to shoulder, hoof to hoof. 1,000 strong now, horned tribes, twisted kin, grotesque siblings of ruin, braying in anticipation, twitching, drooling, clawing one another in excitement. Their king was about to rise. Skargor Mawsight emerged from the black mouth of the tower, cloaked in flayed skin, stitched with the faces of his enemies, his back crowned with a mantle of antlers torn from ancient stags, forest gods, and unlucky centaurs. He no longer walked, he glided, leaving trails of ash and melted grass. His eyes bled constantly. His claw had fused with a censer torch, dripping molten curse fire. He was not a shaman anymore. He was not even Beastman. He was a truth. The truth that chaos had no borders. That rot rules. That nature had teeth, and they would now gnaw at the foundations of man forever. He climbed the last few steps of the spire, bray horns bellowing behind him, thunder crashing above. Then he raised both arms, and the world shivered. No more hiding. No more fence. No more whispers. No more caves and shadows. His voice cracked the stones. The clouds above parted in a green blaze. Beastmen dropped to all fours and brayed like birthing mothers, their claws scraping the stone in euphoric worship. From this rot, a throne. From this grave, a kingdom. We are the nation of Claw. The people of the Bray, he pointed south, where the empire still festered, where towns still burned lamps at night, where temples still dared ring their bells. We will make the earth our temple. We will carve our laws into the bones of their children. The herd howled. Gores beat their chests raw. Minotaurs stomped the skulls of the weak beneath them. Ungors tore each other apart out of pure joy. The witch of broken glass laughed from atop a tower. Even the jabberjays, coiled in shadow, shuddered in reverence. Skargor opened his claw and dropped a human crown, a melted, blackened relic taken from a noble during the last crusade. It clanged once, bounced, and landed in a puddle of blood. Let this be our coronation. Gravemark is our capital. I am the Beast King. The earth beneath them cracked. The sky pulsed with green. The land accepted it. A dominion had been declared. Not of brick, not of gold, not of parchment or crown, but of bone, rot, blood, and bray. And across the border, princes, the winds carried the message. The horn had called. The war had begun. And now there was a king. Chapter 30. The Last Bell. It tolls. Once, twice, a third time, low and crooked, the sound wet and broken. Not a chime, but a death gargle, as if the stone itself were retching up its last prayer. The bell, once a holy relic, once suspended proudly in Grobmar's tower, now hangs cracked, its mouth twisted by heat, its surface etched in runes that bleed sap and pus. What was once cast to praise Sigmar now sings only for ruin. Its toll is not heard only in Fleshmark. It crawls across hills, through forests, down into valleys where caravans go silent and traders forget their destinations. Far to the north, in a war council deep within Altdorf, a map curls. Ink runs. A scribe vomits without reason, and tears out his own tongue to silence the words he suddenly sees in the margins. A general stares at the southern border and mutters, "This sound is not for the dead." But in flesh-marked, the new womb of rot, they know exactly what it means. It is not a warning, it is a summons. Skargor Mawsight, crowned in horn and gristle, watches the bells swing from a frame of spines and wagon wheels, each strike shuddering through his bones. His claw twitches with approval. His soul, long since consumed, burns only with purpose. The empire had grown fat, soft, drunk on its victories over vampires, greenskins, and its own kin. But they had forgotten the woods, forgotten the horns in the fog, forgotten the things that gnaw at the world's edges, patient, paranoid, primal. Around the herdstone, the armies gather. 1,000 herds from 100 fens, groves, valleys, tribes that speak not in language but in bray, howl, and blade. Some are barely beastmen anymore, twisted amalgams of hunger and bone, birthed in war plesh and raised on despair. Minotaurs chant with fists like anvils. Ungors whisper to knives that twitch on their own. Jabberslythe hiss lullabies to the shadows between worlds. The brayhorn is raised. Its mouth is filled with the ashes of burned saints, and when it is blown, the mountains quiver. Skargor raises both arms. The witch of broken glass stands at his side, one eye burning like a candle, the other long since given to her god. She speaks in reverse, her words splintering the teeth of those nearby. And Skargor proclaims, not in a shout, but a bray so thick with power it chokes the lungs of those who hear it. The empire will not fall from throne or siege. It will drown in flesh, in blood, in the voices of those who cannot speak truth, only madness. He smiles through rot-worn gums. We are not war. We are nature, uncaged. We are the hunger that birthed the world. And now we feast. The bell tolls again. One last time. And with its ring, the world shifts. Aborters grow teeth. Churches bleed. And men wake screaming, not from dreams, but memory. The children of chaos are here. Not in iron armor. Not in robes of death, but in horn and mud and man-flesh stitched into cloaks. And there will be no rest. There will be no last stand. Only the sound of bray horns, and the final, crooked toll of a bell that should have stayed buried.